Hey James, it's Corey. Just wanted to make a quick video here because you're asking some really good questions about keywords. I can tell you're kind of struggling with it. And I want to just kind of give you some ideas, but also tell you don't overthink it. Okay. Like it's good to be thinking about the things that you're thinking about, but don't overthink it. Okay. Like sometimes you just need to trust your intuition and go with what seems right. And that's the best way you can go about it. I have a module in my course about this where I say, there's a professional way to do keyword research, but then there's the easy way to do keyword research. And the easy way is basically trust your intuition and like do a little bit of filtering and testing and then going back and looking at Search Console afterwards. That's basically your best bet. But anyway, let me kind of explain a little bit about long tail versus head terms and how this works with photographers and local businesses. So in general, you would say something like a one-word phrase is a head term, like photography, and then wedding photography might be in what they call the chunky middle, or whatever you might want to call this next section, and then more descriptive phrases. So wedding photographers in Columbia, South Carolina, that's going to be long tail. However, whenever I think about head terms for photographers, I kind of push that up a little bit. And I would consider the head terms to be what most SEOs are going to talk about as long tail, because you're not going to be optimizing for wedding. Your site isn't going to rank for wedding photographers across the entire world. It's just not going to happen unless you're building some, huge brand that has, photographers in tons of different cities and that kind of thing. Then maybe your strategy is different. But if you're, a one person or few photographers in a local area, your head term is going to become most likely specialty plus city. So wedding photography in your city, or city wedding photographers, some variation of that. So that being said, if that is the head term, then what is long tail? Well, it's a little bit trickier because there's two kinds of things that could be long tail. You can think about long tail keywords as don't think about the length of the keyword or the topic of the keyword. Sometimes you're going to want to think about the volume of the keyword. So, for example, if wedding photographers in Columbia, South Carolina, which is actually the volume with the most keyword here in the city that I live in, gets around, let's say, 200 searches per month, that exact phrase. Well, there might be some other variation of the phrase that is similar that gets 3 searches a month or 5 searches a month or something like that. Now, with the way that SEO works today, I wouldn't recommend building a separate page for some variation that gets a little bit less search volume if it has the same intent. If someone's still searching for the same thing, if they mean the same thing when they say photographer for my wedding in Columbia, South Carolina, you shouldn't make a separate page for that. It should all be part of the same topic. So one head topic should be weddings in Columbia, South Carolina. That is a head term. If you were optimizing also for a separate city, you'd have a separate head term that was weddings in Charleston, South Carolina, or weddings in Greenville, South Carolina. Those could be 3 separate pages that are targeting a group of keywords that are all head terms, the main topic of the page. So think about the main topic of the page. And then as far as long tail, when you're creating content that is long tail or creating supporting content for these head topics, these cornerstone topics, these topics that are the main purpose, the intent of the page. For those things, you want to think about the other topics related to the subject at hand. And in fact, you're not likely to find long tail keywords on what's really already a long tail keyword that you need to create separate content for. It's going to be related keywords. Okay, so I'll give you an example. I'm actually going to talk about wedding venues in Columbia, South Carolina for this example, because I have a really good post here that gives a clear example of this. So the main topic of this post, the head term, is wedding venues in Columbia, South Carolina. It could be any variation. Wedding venues, Columbia without the N, Columbia SC wedding venues, wedding venue, Columbia SC. Those are all one term, one topic. That's the main purpose of this post. But and by the way, like this post does well for a lot of long tail keywords because there's not much competition for it. Okay. But if I were in a more competitive market and I wanted to build this out with long tail searches, then I'm going to start thinking about, in this case, I would consider outdoor wedding venues, affordable wedding venues, cheap wedding venues, indoor wedding venues, reception wedding venues. I would consider these kind of to be the chunky middle. These are like the terms. These could have separate intent. If I search for outdoor wedding venue, Columbia, South Carolina, I'm looking for something specifically different than just wedding venues, Columbia, South Carolina, right? I don't want to see the indoor options. I want to see only the outdoor options. So that deserves separate content. That's a long tail or mid tail variation on wedding venues in Columbia, South Carolina. But if we start looking through this list, we'll start to find long tail things here as well. So I might consider rustic wedding venues in Columbia, South Carolina to be long tail, where to have a small wedding near me. So there are places, there are things like this, beautiful places to have a wedding. That's long tail. Long tail is essentially just all of the random searches that make up a lot of the volume. You'll have the head terms. So when you're looking at this graph, the head terms, the few things that most people type in, make up a large portion. If you look, like this is pretty equally distributed. The volume under this section, under the black section, is actually about the same as the volume under the green section. So and how this all distributes and stuff is different for every kind of query. But the idea is, even though the majority of these only get 2, 3, 5 searches a month, there's so many variations. In fact, 15% of all keywords that are used every day have never been used before. So there's so many variations that are all part of the same general topic that's what long tail means. So in this case, you could totally go after specific wedding venues as long tail keywords for the main topic of wedding venues in Columbia, South Carolina. And then that specific venue becomes basically the head term for the page that you're optimizing. And you might have something even more specific. So I have a venue that I optimize for, where I optimize specifically for receptions at that venue. So the venue is potentially then a head term, and then the receptions at that venue is a little bit more long tail, but it's supporting because it's a separate intent. So it really has more to do with volume of the number of people searching for the exact match phrase. It has to do with the intent of the keyword. It's not just so straightforward as, like, some of these charts want you to believe 1-word phrases are head terms and 3 to 5-word phrases are long tail. That's not really how it works whenever you're especially optimizing a local small business. But hopefully this is helping to understand a little bit. I know it's a complex topic, and you don't need to get into all the complexities of it as much as you need to just, like I said, think about what makes sense for your page and your site. Think about what someone's trying to find when they search for that keyword. Make your page optimized for that intent. And if something else, some other keyword basically is looking for that same information, don't create a separate page with the duplicate of that information. Make new pages with new intent that then support the topic of the main page. Hopefully that makes sense. I'd love to hear your questions, because I'm still working on trying to give examples and clarify this more and more and more for photographers. I have more about this in the course that I have put out recently, and I'm getting ready to revisit even the one that I've already made, just to add more details, more examples. So anything you can give me, any questions, any feedback would be helpful. I'd love to hear from you. Hopefully this helps. Talk to you later.